Hello, folks, and welcome to a Patreon-sponsored Tea Time. Thank you very much, Brian H., again, for your support on Patreon. If you'd like to find out how you could possibly support the channel more than you already do just by watching, I will have a link to my Patreon campaign in the description below, /selfless, shameless self-promotion. Now, Brian wanted me to talk about must-have PC games or games that deserve a permanent place in PC gaming history. Now, I don't think he really realized it when he asked. I didn't get a PC until about 1995, which I know a lot of you were saying, oh, I was 10 years old when that happened. First off, go to hell. Secondly, I was 17 years old and a senior in high school when I got a computer. So I was a console gamer for a long time, up until actually about that point. That's when I pretty much made the transition from consoles to the master race of PCs with my awesome Packard Bell. So I wanted to kind of morph his topic a little bit. And if this isn't okay, Brian, just let me know. Of course, you can give other suggestions, or you can give the same suggestion again, maybe. I can try tackling just PC games, but honestly, a lot of the older PC games, like pre-1995, 96, I wouldn't have played. The first PC game I played was Duke Nukem for Duke Nukem Forever, or not Forever, but Duke Nukem 3D. So anything before that, I really didn't get a chance to play. So I could address it that way. But the way I kind of wanted to approach this topic was the same spirit of what he was asking, but all the games that I have personally experienced. Of course, I could say things like, oh, Chrono Trigger is a classic, but I've only played Chrono Trigger like 2 hours and I never really got sucked into it. So I wanted to talk more about games that when I think about my history of gaming, if you will, games that really have left a permanent impression on me, and to a lesser extent are probably still hold up well today. And I say probably because a lot of these I haven't played recently, and I might hate them if I went back to play them again. So, but they hold like a permanent imprint in my mind. I also wanted to kind of swerve away from the more well-known games. There are some definitely well-known games in here, but I want to stay away from, Zelda, Mario Brothers, the big, huge games that everybody always talks about, the big classic gaming. So again, there will be some of those in here, but I want to kind of hit on some of the ones you might not have heard about or haven't got quite as much press as the others. So enough talking about that crap. Let's jump right into it. The first game that came to my mind, oddly enough, was DuckTales. For whatever reason, I just really remember playing DuckTales on NES a lot. A friend of mine had the game, and we played that game so much. Keep in mind, this was back in the day. I was probably 13, 14, I guess, when this came out. Maybe younger, I'm not sure. So we didn't have a lot of money to buy games, right? So once you got a game, you played the ever-living hell of it. And we tried different challenges. We tried getting the most money we possibly could. We tried getting the least amount of money you possibly could. Any kind of variation like that we could do to, spice it up. And we just played it all the time. And it wasn't even a thing that we bought this $50 game that, we can now be in an hour and a half, 2 hours tops. But I just remember playing that a lot, and I think part of the reasons it sticks out is because I loved the DuckTales cartoon a lot. Now, if you watch my DuckTales Let's Plays, both the original and the HD remake, you'll know that I'm kind of retreading ground here. But I love that DuckTales cartoon. It really stuck out. Now, if I watched it now, I'd probably hate it. But it was just one of those cartoons growing up as a kid that I absolutely loved the hell out of it. So that made me love the game even more. It's, one of the few games, especially back then, that was officially licensed and wasn't total complete garbage. Like, E.T., which I actually have a copy. I know E.T. is considered one of the worst games ever made. I had a copy of E.T. as a kid, and I remember the frustration of trying to figure it out. If you've ever watched Angry Video Game Nerd or anybody talk about that game and show it off, it's absolutely accurate how bad it was. But the thing is, like, as a kid, you didn't really realize it, right? As a young kid, I didn't have much to compare it to. Keep in mind, this is the Atari days, right? There wasn't a lot to compare it to, like Donkey Kong, Defender, Galaga. things like that. So, you know, this was the start of home console gaming. So I got frustrated with it. I don't think I ever thought, well, this game is just awful. I just thought this game is really weird. This game doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. But now I recognize, no, in fact, it was total garbage and just buggy as hell and just bad all around. But and I didn't think of any Atari games. Now that I think about it, I didn't think of any Atari games to talk about. I guess E.T. is the one that stands out because I remember it being so bad. Other than that, I don't really recall many fighting games, except, or actually, Atari games. I don't know why I said fighting games. There was the one Atari game that I loved, and I forget what it was called, but there was like two frogs on two different lily pads, and there was flies jumping around, and you had to stick your tongue out and catch more flies than the other frog. That one always sticks out. I always really like that one. I don't know why. Very simplistic games back then. But anyway, yeah, that's not a lot of Atari games really like stick out of my mind. And also keep in mind in this list, I'm not going to cover every game that I thought was phenomenal. Not every game that I thought was really good and hasn't been heard about much. I just kind of made this list just thinking about it, kind of poking around in my brain, trying to remember these games. And I'm sure there's going to be some that I missed. So if you have any that you want to mention in the comments, please go ahead and do that. The next game that really sticks out for me on the NES, it kind of does have a cult following, but Maniac Mansion. I loved the hell out of that game. Again, this is the NES version. There was also a computer version as well, but I only played the Nintendo version. That game was so fun. I don't know if I ever owned it. I think I just kept renting it. I think I've rented it like 2 or 3 times, maybe more. I don't think I ever really owned it. But that game was so cool because you could choose between, there was like a total cast of 7 kids, 8 kids, something like that. You could only take 3 with you. You always had to take Dave. And of course, he was like the crappy character for the most part because he didn't have any special skills. But then you had to pick 2 other characters to go with you. And each of them had special skills, like Bernard, who was the nerd. He was good at fixing electronics and things like that. And then there was a girl who was really good with photography. And then, but you know, you get the idea that they had their different skills. And based on the kids that you took, you could beat the game in different ways. That there was all these different ways that you could beat the game. And at the time, this was really, really new. Like it used to be, you know, you go through the game, get the silver arrows, and kill Ganon. Or you get to the final Bowser, cut the bridge with the axe, and he falls into the lava and dies. This is the first game I ever remember playing where you had a huge number of ways to beat the game. Hell, I can't, even thinking about it, I can't think of any other games where there was this many different ways to beat the game. Because like there's the purple meteor, you had to take care of him. You could either like call the interstellar police on him. You could put him in the trunk of a car and shoot him into space. You could blow the house up, which I think you actually lost if you blew the house up. But there was all these different ways and all these little things that you could do. And you could experiment and find new things that you could do. For example, there is one kid who's really good with music. And you could record yourself on the tape and send it to like this record executive guy, and he'd really like it, and he'd send you a record label deal and send it back. And that was part of a quest or whatever to get one of the tentacle people on your team. Well, there's also a record of tentacle mating calls, which was like this high-pitched wailing that would break glass. Well, you could actually record that on the tape and send it to the record executive, and he would play it, and it would, like, he was in this high-rise office building, and the glass behind him would shatter, and he would just go walk to it and go, oh no, or whatever, and then that would just be it. Just little things like that, and I loved experimenting, trying to figure out stuff, because I wasn't reading a guide or anything like that. I was trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? Like, what funny things can I do, or what useful things I could do? But that game just really stuck out of my mind, just because you could spend so much time on it, trying to find different ways to beat the game. Moving on to the Super Nintendo, and I know I'm skipping the NES a lot. Again, I put a lot of time into the NES, Lord knows. But most of that was probably on more games you've heard of. Mario Brothers, and this might be blasphemy to a lot of people. My favorite Mario Brothers on the NES was probably Super Mario Brothers 2. Super Mario Brothers 3 was a masterpiece, no doubt. But I really liked Mario 2. Yes, I realize it's actually Was it Doki Doki Panic or something reskinned? I realized that. I thought it was a hell of a lot of fun. I loved having the choice of different characters, even though Toad by far is the best of all the 4 characters. But I liked the choices you had as far as picking a character and beating a stage. I just thought it was a really cool world. I like the enemy types. I just like that it mixed it up a little bit. But anyway, yeah, so kind of skipping on past the NES to the Super Nintendo, Sim Ant. That's another game that I never owned for whatever reason, but I rented over and over and over again. Sim Ant, if you haven't played this, is you play as an ant and you are trying to get your colony to beat the evil red ants. I think the red ants were the bad ones. I think you were the black ants. And you controlled the yellow ant, and you would do things like you would have to go and get food and fight the enemy ants and try to take over the whole yard. And then once you took the yard over, you had to take the house over. And it was way more fun than it sounds. You had to do little things like controlling the type of, or how many ants were bred. So like if you were in high combat zone, like there's a lot of red ants, you would want to set the little slider to produce more warrior ants. If it wasn't that bad, you wanted more warrior ants to go get food and things like that. So you had to worry about protecting your nest. You always had people randomly killing your ants, like they would walk over with a lawnmower and kill a bunch of your ants, things like that. And one thing I always thought was funny was all the food was peas. So if you killed like a spider or if you killed some other insect, the insect would die and then turn into peas. I don't think they were supposed to be peas, but they look like little green dots. So I always thought that was amusing. And I found a really good exploit that made it killing the enemy ants really easy. What you would do is when you get to a new square and if it had red ants on it, your ant could pick up rocks. You can go to the enemy side of it because every square of the lawn had like basically split into 2, right? You had your side of ants over here and then the red ants. If you took your ant, grabbed the rock, ran over to the other side, found all the red ant holes and covered them with rocks, the red ants would eventually die of starvation and you'd end up winning. Now you would have to keep putting the rocks back because rain would destroy the rocks for whatever reason. But honestly, it was a super easy strategy. The red ants would eventually and pretty quickly starve to death and you would own that tile and then you could just move on to the next tile. But I love the hell out of that game. That might be the first sim game I played, I think. If it wasn't, it was Sim City, which is the next game on my Super Nintendo list. What a nice segue. SimCity might have been the first. I don't remember. Anyway, God, I don't know how much time I spent on SimCity. SimCity I did own, and I spent a ton of time in it, and just trying different things. Though really, the best strategy for that game was the layers of the onion trick, right, where all the stuff in the middle was residential. Excuse me, the second layer was commercial, and then industrial on the outside. And trying to hit the 1 million population was like the ultimate goal. You could get more than 1 million, but 1 million was the highest like ranking you could get. Like, so if you had like 100 people, you were a town. If you had 1,000, you're a village or whatever. I think 1 million was a megapolis or something like that. But yeah, I put a lot of hours into it. It's one of those games I can't really talk about much because it's hard to put into words. But I think most people at least understand what SimCity was about. And I realized this was a popular game, but it's just one that stuck out so much in my mind that I'm putting so many hours into. I had to talk about it. I would be remiss if I did not talk about SimCity. And of course, the music is still, I can hear the different music you could get at the different city levels. And I immediately know, oh, that's SimCity. I remember listening to that all the time because I put such a ridiculous amount of time into SimCity. I don't know if that game would have really held up to today's standards, especially when you have other SimCities. Probably SimCity 2000, from what I hear, is the best to go with. I tried playing SimCity 2000 a few times, and it just throws you in. It's like, here, good luck. There's no tutorials, and I didn't feel like reading the manual. So I haven't really tackled SimCity 2000, but I really should. I think it would really, really suck me in. Another Super game. Wow, I talk real good. I'm getting off center as well. I try to center myself on the camera beforehand. You can see I'm kind of getting off there. But next Super Nintendo title that I spent tons of time on and really sticks out in my mind is Street Fighter 2. Again, not a unpopular game by any stretch, but again, we put so much time into it, I just can't not talk about it. I remember my friend Jeffrey actually had the game before I did. So I would go to his house and play, and he'd always win because, of course, he had the game, so he could practice more often. But the more I went over to his house, I'd go, I'd get a little bit better, a little bit better. And eventually I was beating him all the time, and he would rarely win. And, I had other kids in the neighborhood, and I was by far the best in the neighborhood. I pretty much beat everybody with any character that I picked. Even the crappy characters like Zangief and E Honda, which I don't know if those characters were really bad or if we just didn't know how to use them properly. But even when I would beat them with those characters, I didn't feel like they were all that powerful. But Guile was my man. Street Fighter 2, it was all about Guile. And I remember thinking too, talking strategy with my friend, 12-year-olds talking about serious street fighting strategies. I remember talking about like Ryu and Ken and the Dragon Punch. I remember saying, man, if people could really nail the motions for the Dragon Punch down and get it all the time, it's like you'd be unstoppable because the Dragon Punch trumped almost every other move in the damn game. Like the one I know for sure was Guile's flash kick, because I always got pissed off that the stupid Dragon Punch always trumped my flash kick. Pissed me off every time. But I was like, man, if you could master that move, you would be a god. And because at the time, the whole forward down forward punch was actually pretty difficult, especially probably on the Super Nintendo controller. It didn't make it any easier. But if I sat down now and did it on a Super Nintendo controller, I probably could nail it pretty good because I've had years of experience. But those of you who listen to the podcast, the Super Game Talk Turbo HD Remix podcast, and you should be listening to it, that me and Capanius talked about playing some Marvel versus Street Fighter and all that, like the older games on an arcade cabinet that he's got set up at his work. And I can beat him pretty consistently, but I've told him I seriously put a lot of time into Street Fighter 2, like a lot. So that style of Street Fighter, I'm very proficient at. Let's say if there was like a tournament, I don't think I'd do very well, but I could definitely hold my own, I think. Now the newer Street Fighters and the newer fighting games, terrible. I'm awful. Like I tried Street Fighter 4 when it first came out and went online. It was devastated immediately. So new fighting games, not so much. But that also led to my love of Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat became my main game. I remember Mortal Kombat coming out, and the news talking about the fatalities and how, oh my God, is this too far? Is this going to make kids into murdering maniacs? Because, oh my God, this guy rips his head off and his spine's still connected. And of course, that did the opposite effect, because now all the kids knew about it and was like, oh shit, I want to play Mortal Kombat. Like, that's where it's at. Like, screw that kiddie Street Fighter shit. I want to rip a guy's head off or catch him on fire and burn him to death or rip his heart out and show it to him before he dies. Like, that's badass. So that's when I really got into Mortal Kombat. And then Mortal Kombat 2 came out, which arguably is the best Mortal Kombat 2, or Mortal Kombat, though I would actually say Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was the best. Anyway, that really got me on the whole. I was big into fighting games around that time. But Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 3, and to a lesser extent, Mortal Kombat 4, I was really into the fighting games. I was pretty good at them. I definitely wasn't winning any championships, but I definitely did very well, like in our local arcade. We had, like 4 of us who were regulars, and we play each other all the time. But that was definitely my fighting game / arcade phase. But yeah, that Mortal Kombat definitely sticks out a lot too, because like I said, Mortal Kombat 2, 3, and 4-ish, I spent a lot of time in. 4 wasn't as good, I don't feel, as 3 was. Or at least Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, but it was all right. So next game on my list, Super Nintendo. Now this is one probably a lot of you have not heard of. It's called Genghis Khan 2, Clan of the Grey Wolf. Now I don't remember, and I'm just scratching my nose, not picking it. I don't know why I feel like I need to clarify that every time, but I feel like somebody's going, you were picking your nose. Anyway, I don't remember which one of us found it. This was when I lived in Wyoming. Now, I live in Georgia, have lived in Georgia almost all of my life. 2 years of high school, my sophomore, junior year, I moved to Wyoming to live with my dad. Those of you who are not familiar with U.S. geography, Georgia is the southeast, where it's hot and humid all the time, and then Wyoming is in the northwest, where it's very cold all the time. But so there wasn't a lot to do. My high school at my high school in Wyoming had, I think, 130 kids total. Like, not my class, the entire high school. My class had like 30 kids in it. So there wasn't a lot to do. So I kind of gravitated toward the nerdy kids. So we ended up playing a lot of video games. And I think they knew about it. We ended up renting a lot of games. And Genghis Khan 2 Clan of the Grave was one of them. I think they're the ones who found it. Think of this, if you're familiar with Crusader Kings 2, or, well, I guess any of the Crusader Kings. And by any of them, I mean 1 or 2. Think of it like that, but not as deep. You picked a nation. You could be the Mongols or India or any of these various clans or rulers, and you'd have to do various things. You'd want to build up your army. You'd want to conquer neighboring cities. You'd have to appoint governors. You would need to engage in trade to make sure you have enough money. You'd have to buy troops. Certain areas could only get certain troops. Like in India, you could get elephant troops, and in other areas you could get like mounted riders, things like that. And they all had their their positives and their negatives. So in that way, it was a lot like Crusader Kings 2. And there was like, not just outside of the combat, again, you had to deal with trade, so you had to keep your money up, but you also had to like appoint somebody to rule countries, because you couldn't just rule all your countries, right? So you had to choose somebody to rule these countries you were taking over. And there was a diplomatic edge, because sometimes if those people you appointed didn't like you, or if they were just assholes, they would just declare independence. And then you'd have to go fight them to take the lands back. Or, depending on the situation, they might start taking over your lands if they have the bigger army. So what you'd have to do is, you had a wife, and you could only spend, you only could do so much per turn, depending on like your age and virility and things like that. So you'd want to spend at least a little bit spend of your points per turn with your wife making babies, because sons you could appoint as governors and they would never turn on you. And if you had daughters, you could actually marry the daughters to the rulers of those realms, and they would never turn on you either. So you kind of had to use your kids to your advantage, again, kind of like Crusader Kings. And it was a hell of a lot of fun. And I remember one time in particular that, like, we decided we're going to have like a Crusader, we're going to have a Genghis Khan 2 weekend. So it was me and my friends, Sean and Chris. We're the ones who really loved this game. So what we did was we got 2 TVs, and we hooked one up, and we had 2 Super Nintendos. Like, one was mine, one was his. One was Sean's, I think. And we'd hook like Genghis Khan 2 to one computer, and then Mortal Kombat to the other one. And if you played it multiplayer on Genghis Khan, it took you had to, take turns saying, okay, I want to trade, I want to spend time with the wife, I want to gather these troops. And sometimes it would take a while because it was turn-based. So what we would do is, when it was just me and Sean playing, Chris wasn't really that into the game. I would play, and then Sean would go play Mortal Kombat with Chris. And then once I was done, Sean would come back, make his turns in Genghis Khan. Hello, cat. Make his turns in Genghis Khan, and then I would go play Chris in Mortal Kombat. Like, it was the best gaming weekend ever. It was that weekend really sticks out to me. But if you haven't noticed, this video is going to be a combination of talking about fun, awesome games, and also gaming memories. I hope that's okay with Brian. That kind of diverting sometimes with some of the things that I'm talking about, my nerdy gaming memories. But the next game I want to talk about, and I'm trying to keep these kind of in chronological order. Here's where it's probably going to start falling apart. I kind of put these in by memory, which obviously, as many of you know, my memory is not super great. But anyway, the next game is Quake on the PC. Now, this might seem weird. I didn't think Quake was that great of a game when it came out. Again, I know blasphemy, but I thought Quake was kind of bland. Back when it was like Doom versus Duke, I much preferred Duke, because Duke 3D had much more interesting weapons and abilities. With Quake, or with Doom, you had like the rocket launcher, and most of the guns were like, it was a hierarchy of weapons, right? Like the top weapon was better than the next one. This one was better than this one. It wasn't like, well, this one's better in this situation. That was true to an extent, maybe, but for the most part, the top weapon was the best for most situations. And that applies to Quake as well. Again, there's variations. Like sometimes the grenade launcher is better than the lightning gun, but the lightning gun was pretty fucking sick all around. Duke, obviously that happened to an extent, but there was definitely more variation. You had the cool pipe bombs where you could throw those and set those off whenever you wanted. You had the ice gun, which would freeze opponents. And I think if you bounced it off like mirrors or glass or shot at mirrors or glass, it would actually bounce off and go around corners. So you could use that if you knew somebody was like hiding or camping around a corner and there was glass or something like that. You had the shrink ray, which would shrink an enemy and they could try to get away from you, but if you stepped on them, you would just crush them immediately. And you had all these cool different weapons. And you had these abilities like the Hollow Duke, which would make a Carpy of you. It wouldn't move, but it would just sit there and kind of face and do whatever you were doing. So if you did that right, you could trick somebody into like wasting ammo and time shooting at the Hollow Duke. You had other stuff, which I can't now. Of course, I can't remember any of the other items. And another thing that Duke had way back in the day, and nobody ever talks about this, or nobody I've ever seen talks about this. Duke had teleporters, and you could shoot. And if I remember correctly, you could see through the teleporter. So if I knew somebody was on the other side of a teleporter, I could shoot a rocket through the teleporter, and it would come out the other side. And I remember when Portal came out, people were like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, you can make portals and you can just walk through the portals and appear other places and throw stuff through the portals and it shows up. Like, that's amazing. I'm like, Duke had that. Like, Duke 3D had that. And I may be misremembering, but I'm almost positive it had that. But anyway, I always liked Duke better. The big problem with Duke was that it did not take into effect Z-axis aiming. So in other words, you had to aim at an enemy obviously this way, but if the enemy was up here, because he had a jetpack, another great item, you could just aim below him and it would auto target on the Z-axis. That was lame, but you had to keep in mind this was Doom and Duke were at a time when most people actually used the keyboard for those games. That's why if you play Doom now, everything's mostly one level, right? Or if an enemy is on a second level, you put the cursor underneath it and it automatically shoots the weapon above, because people were still using the keyboard. The same with Duke. Most people were using the keyboard and the cursor keys to shoot, and the mouse just to shoot. I don't think people were really moving around a lot with the mouse. Quake was when people really started to use the mouse and the keyboard to look around. And I remember trying to learn the mouse and keyboard because it was at a cyber cafe that I went to a lot in my college years. And people were using the mouse and keyboard. I'm like, oh my God, like you're using the mouse and keyboard for this? And they're like, yeah, it's like once you get used to it, it's so much better. But when I was trying to learn, like I'm running into the corner, like my guy's looking in the walls and the ceiling and blowing myself up. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to get used to this. Like this is just torture. But once I learned it, I was like, oh my God, it was like, this is so much better than anything else we've done before. But anyway, going back to Quake, I didn't think Quake itself was that interesting of a game. I thought it was a little shallow. It was more about knowing where the good guns were, memorizing the maps, memorizing where the armor was, memorizing where the ammo was, memorizing where the good weapons were, memorizing where the quad was. I think Quake had quad. I think so. Anyway, learning where all of that stuff was, memorizing it, and then just cycling the map, right? Once you got ahead, if you were pretty good, you could shut out everybody else by keeping them away from this stuff. And I always thought that was incredibly shallow. I know a lot of people are big into that. It's like, oh, well, that's the whole strategy. That's just not that interesting to me. So I never really was that into it. I did like Capture the Flag with Quake. I played a lot of Capture the Flag because I thought it was more interesting, and because people put grappling hooks in the game where you could like grab onto a wall or a ceiling and zip up. You could actually also use it to latch onto an enemy and pull yourself to them, and it also did a little bit of damage over time, which was always fun. But the grappling hooks were a hell of a lot of fun. There was a lot of interesting things you could do with the grappling hooks. And then Quake led to Team Fortress, the original Team Fortress. Again, this was when I learned about Team Fortress in the Cyber Cafe, and like that was so amazing. And this was way back, even before. I think it was what was 2 classes when I played. There were only 5 classes, and they added 2 more with a patch. I want to say the classes they added were the engineer and the spy. I want to say those are the 2 that they added. But anyway, I really fell in love with Team Fortress, and that was the main reason I played Quake at all, because it was part of the Quake engine. And I remember spending an asinine amount of time playing in that, over a dial-up modem, no less. If I got a server with 350 ping, holy shit, this is like I'm playing local. 350 ping, this is amazing. Most of the time it was around 450, 500. So imagine those of you who haven't had the joy of playing, especially first-person shooters with 400, 500 ping, just imagine adding half a second to everything that you do. Roughly, that's about what it was like. There was a lot of predicting as far as what you thought was going to happen and things like that. But man, I loved the hell out of Team Fortress. My God, I played that so much. And of course, 2 fort. There was all these variations. There was like 4 forts. There was a lot of other ones like the Rock. I love the Rock. The Rock was this cool map where, sorry, my nose itches all the time. Get off my back. But the Rock was really cool. You had these, I think it was 2 bases. It's been a long time, so if I mess up any of the details, forgive me. I haven't played the Rock in a decade, so but you had the 2 bases, and there was like a key, and you had to grab the key and take it to the gas chamber. And if you did, like all these, you get like a countdown of like 10 seconds, and everybody in that base, enemies, allies, whatever, had to find like a gas suit. And if they didn't have one within 10 seconds, the gas would be released and everybody would die. I think that was 2 bases. I think there was 2 bases for that. Anyway, that map was a hell of a lot of fun. And there was another that was kind of like 2 fort, but it was dark, and you had to get into the enemy base, and they had like a control room, and you had to destroy it. And usually like demos and whatnot was really good for that. But man, that's another game that I spent a ton of time in. And Team Fortress, I think on most servers, had the grappling hook enabled, so you could do some fun sniping and whatnot with that. But yeah, and that's when Feign Death was actually, you could do Feign Death with the spy. And Feign Death was actually, I don't think you can't Feign Death with a new one, can you? No, I don't think you can. Wow, that's sad. I don't play the spy that much in TF2. But the spy in TF1, you could like Feign Death, so make it just look like you're dead, so you're just laying on the ground. And you might not think, that actually fooled a lot of people. Another thing that made the spy way better in TF1, in my opinion, was that a lot of servers either had friendly fire on or they had mirror damage on. So mirror damage is if you shoot an ally, like let's say I shoot an ally in the back for 50 damage, instead of him taking 50 damage, I take 50 damage. It's kind of a halfway point between friendly fire, because obviously if you don't have admins on a friendly fire server, then somebody can just grief and keep killing their own teammates. But with mirror damage, you can't really do that because you end up blowing the shit out of yourself. So I played on a lot of servers that had friendly fire and mirror damage. So you couldn't just shoot everyone. In Team Fortress 2, that was the biggest disappointment. It's like, oh, well, you think there's a spy, just blast them. And if they die, they're not a spy. So with TF1, you couldn't really do that with those servers because you'd either end up killing a friendly or you'd kill yourself. And again, it's funny, these like random moments really stick out. One thing I remember was I was playing as a spy and running into the enemy base. And for whatever reason, the guy knew I was a spy. But I was dressed as a sniper, and I ran up on it was 2 fort. I ran onto the sniper deck, and I was a little bit ahead of him. So kind of that middle area of the sniper deck on Team Fortress 2, the map's very similar. Yeah, I kind of ducked in there and feigned death, and the demo ran by and just saw the body, so he just kept running. And there was a real sniper on the other side sniping, and I heard him like blasting him with the with the demo, the explosives, and then like knocked him off the side. I always thought that was hilarious. But they also couldn't instant kill with a backstab. They think they did a lot of damage with backstab, but I don't think it was instant kill. But spies were a hell of a lot of fun to play back in the day. Yeah, I love Team Fortress. Team Fortress Classic, I enjoyed as well, but I didn't really get as into it. I don't know what it was. And just to kind of throw this out there, a lot of people piss and moan about no grenades in Team Fortress 2. Quite frankly, taking grenades out was the smartest move they've ever done. Grenades I love Team Fortress, but it was incredibly spammy, or it could be incredibly just spammy. And it was balanced by, again, a lot of servers using friendly fire or mirror damage. So you couldn't just throw all your grenades, because you did have a limited number of grenades. I think you had regular grenades, and I think you had like class specific grenades, if I remember right. It might have just been class specific. But anyway, you couldn't just throw them in there, because if you had an ally in there, you'd blow them away and either kill them and piss your teammates off, or you'd die from the mirror damage. So if you were on one of those servers, it was limited. I don't think I've ever seen a friendly fire server ever Team Fortress 2. I don't doubt that they exist, but they're probably exceedingly rare. So I think without friendly fire, the game would be incredibly spammy with those grenades, because they definitely, even with friendly fire and mirror damage, the grenade spam, and especially if you threw in demos, like the explosive spam was absolutely asinine. And people are like, oh, well, conk grenades, man. The really good players could conk grenade. Like, I'm sorry. Like, if you think, and I mean, this might sound a little sassy, but maybe I am a little sassy. But if you think using conk grenades to like jump on top of the enemy was like this supreme showing of skill, I don't know what to tell you, because it was incredibly easy to do that. Like, I don't really get who are these people who think that was difficult. It was not difficult. You could practice it and get pretty damn good at conk jumping pretty easily. If you're not familiar, conk stood for concussion grenades. And if you get hit by a concussion grenade, your vision would kind of go weird, and your vision, like, you would automatically do this. But you could use conk grenades. They didn't do any damage, but you could use them to, like, if you threw them and then jumped at the right time, or if you were in the water, it was even easier in the water. You could just throw them and they hit the bottom of the water. And if you were high enough above it, it would just shoot you out of the water. Like it would traject you out of the water, and you'd get into the enemy base super easy. And some people were like, oh, that takes a lot of skill. I was like, no, it doesn't. That's very easy. Just like pipe bomb jumping is easy and rocket jumping is easy. It's not overly difficult. So I absolutely love that change that they took grenades out. But Team Fortress, again, another game that I spent years playing, or well, a long time playing. And I remember the only reason I wanted Quake 2 was for Team Fortress 2. And then there was those screenshots. Anybody who's kept up on Team Fortress knows that there was those screenshots for a while where Team Fortress 2 was going to be super realistic. And there was like a picture of a spy, like, and again, it looks like a totally legit, like, realistic, well, graphically for the time, spy like stabbing a guy and dragging him away or something like that. And it was going to be super realistic. And then Team Fortress 2 came out from Valve, and it was like, whoa, this is not anywhere close to what it was going to be like years ago. But I'm okay with it. I love Team Fortress 2. I've probably put at least 400 hours into Team Fortress 2, I'd imagine. So I love Team Fortress 2 a lot. But, Team Fortress 1 still has a special place in my heart. So anyway, enough about Team Fortress. Next game I want to talk about is Fallout. In particular, Fallout 1. Again, I remember how Fallout came into my life. My friend, Donnie, you guys might have seen him as Broken Troll on a few of my co-op Let's Try videos. And also, he was going to be on Diablo 3, the co-op. But this was back when I was in high school. So we're going to go back a little bit. So back in high school in 95, 96. Shut up. And we used to play D&D at a friend's house every Friday. A tradition we keep up even to this day, even though it's different friends. But anyway, we played D&D at this guy's house every Friday. And one day, Donnie came in with this game called Fallout. We knew nothing about it. We just saw the weird box. It was a rectangular box, but the art was printed so it's supposed to be on its side instead of standing up. my hand. I don't know why I make hand motions. Like you can't see what I'm doing. But it was sideways, and the box art did look cool. And Donnie just likes the whole post-apocalyptic thing anyway. And I saw it, I was like, Fallout. I was like, what's that? He's like, that's an RPG. It's like post-apocalyptic. And I'm like, and I was like, so what do you know about this game? Sorry, my cat's meowing. She never randomly meows. That's weird. Well, she doesn't never, but sometimes she does. Anyway, I was like, what do you know about this game? He's like, oh, nothing. It's like the box just looked cool and the description on the back looked cool. I'm like, you bought this game because it looked cool. You like the box art and you know nothing about it. He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, that wasn't very smart. Turns out that he just got very lucky and bought one of the best games ever created. So we loaded it up on our friend's computer and we get out of the vault. We go to the first town and I'm like, can you kill these people? Like, can you just kill anybody you want? And they're like, yeah, you know, you probably could, but I'm not going to. I'm like, well, that's not fun. Like, start killing these people. Like, take their stuff. And we kind of took turns for a little while, just kind of messing around with it. So when I took my turn, of course, the first thing I did was try to kill everybody in town. And quite difficult because they have, like, nice guns, and you have, like, a pistol. And eventually, I remember finding a way to kill everyone in town by, like, starting inside of a building and killing everyone really quick. And then, like, as they try to come in through the door, like, kill them one at a time. And finally, I killed everyone in town. And I was so proud. I think I had to have Ian with me. I think that's what it was. I think I recruited Ian. And then we killed everyone in town. And I was like, oh my God, this is the best RPG ever made. But I ended up buying the game and spent many, many, many hours in it. And my very first character was almost positive was a female sniper. I don't think I named her Chloe at the time. I don't remember what I named her, but I don't know when the whole Chloe name really started. But yeah, I was a female sniper and who basically killed everyone when she could. Like, she would get the quests for the area. Sorry, my cat's being a butthole again. And I would kill everyone, or well, I would do all the quests until I got powerful enough, and then I would just wipe everyone out. I think I killed, in that playthrough, I think I killed every single person in every city except 2 guys behind a door that I couldn't unlock in the Brotherhood of Steel, and the Overseer in Vault 13, your main vault. You can't kill him. He has like infinite hit points, so you can't kill him. So those are the 3 people in the entire game that I didn't brutally murder. And that just started my love affair with that game. You know, I try it again. I play it with like a different build. And this was back again when I didn't have very much money. So it was not uncommon to play one game a lot. But this Fallout I played a lot. And that really started my love affair with that game. Fallout 2, I bought it on release. And man, like, one thing that's kind of been lost to the ravages of time is that Fallout 2 was pretty damn buggy when it was released. And I remember I remember posting on their forums, and people were pissed because they had all these like obvious bugs. And some representative had the balls to say something like, well, you know, if you guys, you know, if you just want to like shelf the game, like just stop playing it and then we'll get a patch out. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm like, is that your answer? Like, your answer is, well, just don't play the game because it's so buggy and we'll eventually fix it. Man, I remember being furious, like, that they thought that this was a good response to people having all these problems. My cat's being an attention whore again. I'm trying to keep her quiet. She's sitting on the desk. But it was still a great game. Fallout 2 was still a great game. I remember being disappointed by it because, of course, the first thing I did was, hey, starting village. Let's murder everyone. So I started killing everyone, and you actually lose the game if you do that, which I always thought was very heavy-handed. But for the most part, I think the game was phenomenal, and it definitely a worthy sequel to Fallout 1. Fallout 3 and New Vegas, I also love those games very much. I like New Vegas more than Fallout 3, but the whole series, the Fallout series, is one of my favorite series, probably my favorite series of all time in all of gaming. And the individual games, excuse me, God, earn a top 10 spot. I kind of put all those games together. Sorry, I know it's cheating, but I'm putting them all in my top 10 spot. Deal with it. So yeah, Fallout games, absolutely love those. Would love to do an LP of the entire series, but there's so much text in the first 2 games. I don't know. I'm really not sure about that one. I'll think about it. Anyway, next game I want to talk about in series is Thief. Now, if any of you, again, have watched my Thief LPs, either the new one or the old ones, or old one, no, I love this series. This is my second favorite series of games of all time. Thief 1, I remember the demo. I don't remember if I got it on a disc. I think I got it on a disc, like one of those back in the day when gaming magazines had PC game demos all on the disc. I think I got it from one of those. I remember reading about the game. I remember, it's something like, oh, sorry, I'm shaking the camera when I'm petting the cat. I remember reading, it's like, oh, it's a stealth game. It's a first-person sneaker, and it's a whole new genre has been created. And I remember, reading good things about it. I'm like, that sounds pretty cool. I'm gonna give that a try. And I think a friend of mine had played it a little bit and had told me about it. So I was like, yeah, I'll try this out. So I tried the demo. I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. And I'm not proud to admit this, not proud at all to admit this, but I did pirate it. I pirated it because I was broke. Not trying to justify it, but it is what it is. I did end up buying it. Actually, I bought that game like 3 times, but I did buy it when it was still like, the company was still in business and fully retail. But because I still had the box somewhere. I don't know where the hell it is, but anyway, I did pirate it at first and then bought it. And I absolutely loved that game. It's another game where I spent a lot of time trying different things, trying to get as much of the loot as I possibly could, trying to beat missions in certain ways. The big weaknesses for Thief were like the Tomb Raider-esque levels where you're fighting, like you're avoiding elementals and weird dinosaur creatures and the undead, things like that. And I feel that really took away from the Thief aspects. They fixed a lot of that with Thief 2. A lot of people consider Thief 2 the best of the series. I pretty much agree with that. I think it's pretty definitively the best of the entire series. I haven't beat the latest Thief, but almost certainly it won't be better than 2. The thing about the Thief series, and this is why I don't think it'll beat it. The thing about the Thief series to me is it's not just the gameplay. If you just took Thief's gameplay and put it in a different world, it wouldn't be as good. It wouldn't be that distinct Thief experience. The thing about Thief, to me, that makes it the Thief experience is the atmosphere. You've got the various factions. You have the pagans, you have the mechanists, you have the hammers, you had the keepers, and you have Garrett like all in between it. You had that very, very distinctive cinematic style. If you haven't seen any of the cinematics, go ahead and look them up on YouTube. They just very distinct, very Thief. They had that Thief music, and just the atmosphere, and everything came together and created this awesome world that I wanted to play in. And that whole experience is what was there for me. If it lacked all of that other stuff, I'd still remember Thief fondly. I'd still really like it, but I don't know if I would hold it to such high regard. And not to break into, I'm not going to break into a mini review, but I think that's where the new Thief fails. Gameplay wise, I think the new Thief so far has been really fun. I still haven't beat it yet at the time of this recording, but the atmosphere and the Thief world isn't there. I don't want to get off the topic too much, but in a nutshell, they stripped all of the stuff that was Thief, and I want to say they kind of tried to put their own stuff in, but they kind of didn't even try that. There's a story, but there's just not those things that you're going to really remember and stick to, like, the funny conversations with the guards, or the hammer's crazy righteousness with the hammer, and reading all those texts about the hammers and all these scriptures about the builder and all these things like that really made the world feel alive and real. They really made the overall Thief experience what it was. And I still suggest anyone play those. You might skip one. Honestly, I would probably tell you to skip one unless you just absolutely had to play them all. Skip one. It had some technical issues. There was too many levels where you weren't being a thief. You were being, again, more like a badly equipped Lara Croft. And I think you can give it a miss. Thief 2, however, is absolutely worth playing, I think. I'm going to LP that at some point on the channel, maybe once the new Thief is done. And I'd like to do 3 as well. I still haven't beat 3. I enjoyed it. I forget why I stopped playing it. I probably just got distracted by something else. But I enjoyed it, and I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people said. But yeah, the Thief series is definitely one of those that sticks out in my mind as a game that to me will stand the test of time. Another 2 games, I'm going to lump these together. Dungeon Keeper 1 and 2. Another, set of absolutely fantastic games that I will always remember and will probably always be able to pick up and play. Because I have picked up Dungeon Keeper 2 and played it for hours, even semi-recently. So it has stood up to, it is still playable today, and it's still very enjoyable today. But, Dungeon Keeper, if you're not familiar, in a nutshell, you play the bad guy. You create the dungeon. You attract these evil minions like skeletons and trolls and vampires and all this. And the enemy heroes try to break into your vault and destroy your dungeon heart. And your people that you hire, the gargoyles and whatever, they defend. Now, you don't control them directly. You try to influence what they do. You have to find ways to attract them, like have certain types of buildings and whatnot. And then in exchange for having those buildings that they like and for feeding them and things like that, they will defend your lair from the heroes. And there's definite flaws in both games. I think one of the big flaws in both games is it was a little too easy to defend from the human attackers. I think you could just pick up all your enemies and drop them very near the enemy heroes. And they tried to fix this in the second one so that when you drop them, your enemies would be, or your little minions would be stunned. It didn't matter though. They would just, you'd usually have so many. They might kill a few of your enemy or kill a few of your minions, but by the time they waked up, they would just mop the floor with the heroes. So I would have liked a little bit of variation there as far as all of that goes. As far as keeping it a challenge, keeping the enemies coming through. It was just too easy to set up these big trap chains too that would just annihilate the heroes. So it was too easy, but just building the dungeon, getting the enemies getting the minions to come in, and that was just so fun. We're not even going to talk about the Dungeon Keeper iOS game. I don't even want to think about how they ruined that amazing franchise. But those games were awesome. They had that cool humor. You could slap the imps. And with Dungeon Keeper 2, you could set up a gambling den. And if somebody won like the big lotto, it would play Burn Baby Burn, Disco Inferno. That was always awesome because all the monsters would dance. And like every time that happened, I would always stop and watch. But like, yeah, it never got old to me. But man, those there's a lot of fondness I have for those games because as a kid, I always cheered for the bad guys. I wanted the Decepticons to win. I wanted Skeletor to beat He-Man. And I almost always cheered for the bad guys. And being able to finally play the bad guys was just awesome. A worthwhile nod is sent to the way of Evil Genius as well. Great game on that as well. Let's see, what else is on my list? Pizza Tycoon. This is an old one. This is way before the whole Tycoon craze where you couldn't play 50 different Tycoon games. The idea was the same. You start a pizza shop. You design your own pizzas with various ingredients on them. And depending on whatever the current trends were, the current tastes were, different people would order them. And you could set the prices for the pizzas. You had to worry about keeping the right amount of stock of materials in, just typical things you would normally do as a pizza chain, opening new restaurants, competing restaurants, doing a lot of arms dealing, buying and selling weapons, selling missiles and whatnot to foreigners. Oh wait, yes, that was a little different. That funny enough, that actually kind of broke the game because I don't know why they thought this was a good idea, but you dealt with also Ice Cream, which was the game's way of you buying and selling weapons, and they called them Ice Cream. I don't really know why they thought you needed weapons trading in a Pizza Tycoon game, but it was there. And if you did it right, you could make bukus of money. Obviously, you had to worry about getting caught, but once you started making a lot of money, it was a non-issue. So I didn't do a lot of the arms trading because it was a little too easy to abuse. And the game became more about arms trading and less about making pizzas and great pizza joints. So that's definitely one of those games I don't almost ever hear anyone ever talk about, but I played the hell out of, and it's pretty darn old. You probably need DOSBox to run it. Almost certainly you need DOSBox to run it, I would think. I don't even think you can get it on GOG. You could probably find it in one of those abandonware type websites where you can just grab games that are so old that the developer and the publisher don't even either exist anymore or just don't even care because you can't legitly buy the game anywhere. It's worth looking into. It would obviously run on pretty much anything. Your phone could run this thing if it has Windows OS because it's very, very old. But yeah, Pizza Tycoon, absolutely love that game. Designing your own pizzas was pretty fun, and trying to temper them to the current goals. Another thing you could do that I did enjoy was you could sabotage the enemies' pizzerias, so you could sneak in after hours and drop bombs everywhere and blow up all their shit. But if you got caught, you'd go to jail and you'd lose a lot of money and blah, blah, blah. So that part was kind of fun, but then I think they took it a little too far with the actual arms dealing. But yeah, Pizza Tycoon, absolutely great game. Duke 3D is on my list. I talked about that a bit, but Duke 3D is, in my opinion, one of the best first-person shooter games ever made of that era. And I say of that era because I haven't played it again recently. I've played like the beginning. I think I played the first stage. I downloaded when it was free on GOG. I think I grabbed it and played the first stage of it just to get the feel again. First of all, that game was freaking hard. I was on normal and getting my ass kicked. So that game was pretty damn hard. Way more difficult than these sissy ass first person shooters we got now. Where, oh, I'm getting damaged. I'll just hide behind this garbage thing and I'm fine now. But I miss that. And I'd like to do an LP of Duke Nukem as well. I look awkward. I move my head a lot too. I hate that. When I watch back, I'm like, yeah, so Duke Nukem was really awesome. But anyway, yeah, Duke Nukem 3D, I loved it. I played it a lot, the single player. And I got like a lot of the expansions. And, a lot of times you would find at the gaming store, like, this disc is 100 Duke Nukem levels. And you would buy that and play through the various levels. I really love Duke. I always liked it more than Quake and more than Doom because of the weapon variety. And just Duke was lovable. Like, I love Duke, and people now whine and cry about, oh, he's so sexist and oh, he's a terrible person. I'm not uptight, so I can enjoy it, and I can enjoy it for what it is, which is it's not supposed to be taken seriously. It's I don't look up to Duke Nukem. Like, I think he's a total badass. But I wouldn't be, an asshole. Which, to be fair, the old Duke wasn't really sexist as much as, like, the new Duke, Duke Forever, which we probably shouldn't even talk about, was, I don't think Duke Nukem in Duke Forever was a misogynist. I think he was just an asshole. He was an asshole to everyone. It didn't matter. Men, women, he treated like shit. Which is one thing I didn't like about one of the many things I didn't like about Duke Forever. But at any rate, yeah, I enjoy Duke for what it is. I enjoy Duke Nukem himself for what he is. Again, I understand it's satire. It's not supposed to be taken seriously. But unfortunately, we can't have things like that these days because people whine and cry about how it's sexist and how it's regressive and a bunch of other nonsensical horse shit. But anyway, sidetrack. But I think they're really good games. And I would really like to play them again on the channel because I really loved Duke 3D. Again, just the attitude, his little expressions, and just the gameplay was a lot of fun. I love the weapons and the various items that you could pick up. Another game, StarCraft. Now, I started on Warcraft. Again, I remember playing this at a friend's house. Well, to kind of get you started on how I got into Warcraft, and hopefully this is actually interesting to folks. Warcraft, I still distinctly remember, I bought a 28.8 modem, and I going up from a 14.4 modem, so I was high class. 28.8 modem, shit yeah. It came with a disc with a demo of Warcraft 1. Excuse me, and I played through it and I was like, holy shit, this game is awesome. So I went to the store to buy Warcraft. And it turns out Warcraft 2 must have just came out because I saw Warcraft 2 boxes and I was like, oh shit, Warcraft 2 is out. Well, I'll just buy this instead. So I bought it, took it home, and I was like, oh my God, like this is an amazing game. So I played the shit out of it. I didn't play online much, I don't think. But I did play the single player a lot. And Donnie, my friend, I've known Donnie since we were in high school, so around 1995. It was a year before I graduated high school. Shut up. So yeah, I knew him back in 95, and he had it as well. And back in our D&D sessions, I would come over on Friday or just whenever, and we'd play a little bit of Warcraft. And this was back when we clicked everything. We weren't using hotkeys, we were just clicking on everything. And after I got out of high school, I started going to the cyber cafe, and they were using the hotkeys. I was like, holy shit, like you build so much faster when you hit like B and then F to make a farm instead of click, build, find the farm, click the farm, move your mouse. It's like, oh my God, this is so much faster. So I kind of taught myself, and I started showing Donnie. I was like, look at this, man. Look how much faster we can build if we memorize the hotkeys. And I just remember that, like, it's so funny, I guess, now that it's such... Growing up, as much as I complain about being old, and being old sucks, don't ever do it, it's kind of cool that I'm part of something that I saw it from the beginning, right? For pretty much the beginning. Yes, I understand there was systems before the Atari, but really the Ataris, when people think of video gaming, the beginnings, they really think of arcades and they think of Atari. And there is something really cool about being a part of that, remembering playing Atari. Remember seeing ads for the Nintendo and thinking, holy shit, those graphics are insane. Look at those Nintendo graphics. Like, I really want one. And seeing various things start off as just like oh, that's cool, or whatever. And now they've totally become, this is just how things work. When you're playing an RTS, you're using hotkeys. Like, nobody doesn't use hotkeys. Like, this is just the assumption. But when those games came out, a lot of us didn't even think about hotkeys. Like, we saw them, but it's like, who's going to remember B is build, F is farm, H is town hall, whatever. Nobody's going to remember all that. So let's just click on them. So it wasn't even a thing. But then once you learned, it's like, holy shit. And again, playing FPS games with a mouse and keyboard. And instead of just like, using the mouse to look around, not just fire, which I think we use spacebar for. I don't remember. Anyway, it's cool, like, being able to look back and see when that was a new thing, like a whole new idea, and kind of following it until now, where again, if you're on the PC and you're playing FPS, obviously you're using a mouse and keyboard. There's no other way to even conceive of it. But anyway, back to StarCraft. We played Warcraft 2, and we started hearing about the new game StarCraft is coming out. It's like Warcraft, but in space. And I forget why we were... Hold on just one second. Sorry about that. Cat was driving me nuts. She's sitting there clawing at the bag of new food when she had food in her damn dish. I don't know what her deal is. Anyway, cats, what are you going to do? So, back to StarCraft. I bought StarCraft, I'm pretty sure, on release day. And I had the box somewhere, I think, where it has the Hydralisk head on the bottom or on the front. Because I remember there was like a limited edition where you could pick which head was on the front. Or you could either pick the Terran, the Hydralisk, or the Zealot head on the front. Excuse me. And I wanted the Hydralisk. I was like, oh, the Hydralisk looks cool as hell. So I remember buying that. And this is before Collector's Edition was a thing. And this was back when Blizzard put those really cool Blizzard pads in games. Remember those where they had like the Blizzard pad you could write on? It had Blizzard what's the word I'm looking for? Embroidered on the back or whatever. It's not the word I'm looking for. watermarked on the back. I love those. Why did they stop doing that? Cheap bastards. So anyway, we took the, I don't remember why we did this, but we took the game, me and Donnie, again, took the game to a friend's house and we installed it on his computer. And we started playing, at the beginning of the campaign. And we were like, oh my God, this game looks amazing. Oh my God, those little creatures like unburrowed from the bottom of the ground and attack our Marines. Holy shit, this is incredible. And that's when I started playing a lot of StarCraft. And that's when I really realized that I am terrible at RTS games. Like, no matter how much I practice, I lost a lot. This is before replays. This is before you could download a replay, or you could just go to YouTube and watch someone play, or go to Twitch. Definitely not before Twitch, where you could watch somebody stream it live. So, but I loved watching. I've always been a watcher. That sounds a little creepy, but when it comes to video games, I like watching other people play. Obviously, I love to play them, but I love to watch. I've always been that way. One of the things I loved about going to the arcades was watching people play various games and just seeing how they did it. I like to watch. I don't know why. I've always enjoyed watching other people play. So I wanted to watch better people play StarCraft. So one thing that started to become popular was having like these private rooms, and people would talk, and people would say like, hey, you guys want to play a game? And people made observer maps. And again, keep in mind, none of this was built in just to the base game at the time. So what they would do is, if I remember correctly, they would take a regular map and they would add extra seats, and for that player, they'd have basically the entire map revealed so that other people could join the game and watch the other people play and not interfere. Now, there was, of course, you're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to say, oh, hey, this guy's coming up from the left-hand side, even though you technically could. But it was understood that you did not do that. And I would join these things, and I'd always be, oh, I want to observe. And I would like to observe people playing games like that. And I remember spending so much time in chat rooms just really hoping somebody would want to play somebody else so I could hop in and I could get to observe the match, and pray that it didn't lag out, because if you lagged, it was expected that you very quickly left the game, so you didn't lag the people who were actually playing. And then I remember that's when battlereports.com, any old school StarCraft players probably remember that. I think it was battlereports.com. Battle reports were probably the very first incidents that I could ever link back to of Let's Plays. Like, this is before, almost certain this is before Something Awful started doing screenshot LPs. But basically the idea with battle reports was that, again, keep in mind, this is before YouTube. I don't think YouTube was a thing then. And if it was, recording an entire match of StarCraft was not feasible because of the computer requirements. There wasn't really software that was really good at that kind of thing back then. And there either wasn't anywhere to send it to, or the files would be just way too big, right? The files would just be way too big. One match would eat up your entire hard drive, if not more. And uploading with dial-up and watching with dial-up would just be a nightmare. So the idea of watching the matches was like watching them live via video was pretty much unheard of, if I remember correctly. So the idea with battle reports was that someone would watch a match and take screenshots of the match as it progressed and then write up about it, right? So it'd say, this person blue started with a 7 drone spawning hatch build. This other person went with a 6 Marine or 6 SCV and then barracks build. And they have pictures of various conflicts. And over time, people got better and better at writing these battle reports. And some people had their own flair, and some people were just exceptionally good at writing them. And like I say, this is like the first real instance that I can think of any kind of Let's Play. And it wasn't technically a Let's Play, I guess, because it was more, they were acting as a kind of a sports reporter, reporting on the various matches. But I spent so much time on battlereports.com reading the various matches, and because that was the closest I could get other than hopping into OBS games. And then Blizzard they released a patch, and I can't remember what they did first. I don't know if it was a deal where they natively supported observer slots, or it was replays that you could download replays. I think it was replays. I think it was actual replay files, because I remember when they announced it, I was like, holy shit, like I can download replays and load it into my StarCraft and watch other people play. Like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, that was just, I love that. Like, that was just like, I love the shit out of it, because I could do my favorite thing, watching other people play games, and watch them play StarCraft, because I was so bad at StarCraft. I just enjoyed watching really good people play. But anyway, yeah, StarCraft ate up a lot of my time. Not in maybe the specific way you'd think. I probably spent a lot of times playing custom games, and shamedly, I spent a lot of time playing Big Game Hunters. If you're not familiar, Big Game Hunters, or BGH, was a map that Blizzard had released where you basically had like way more minerals and gas than you normally would. And honestly, it led to a lot of poor playing, because a lot of people chose that map because if you were not good, it was easier to do good on that map because of all the minerals. And it actually it backfired in a way, because a lot of people just played Big Game Hunters, so they never increased their skill, myself being in that lot. And I knew I was only hurting myself by playing BGH, but I kept doing it anyway because I felt like I just couldn't get any better. But yeah, it was the BGH days and the shame of playing on BGH, but in all kinds of custom maps and whatnot. So yeah, a lot of time spent on StarCraft, and it definitely had a significant time frame chunk cut out of my life, a positive one. Speaking of Blizzard games, you can't not talk about Diablo and Diablo 2. Diablo 1 was a game that I learned about at a cyber cafe. I remember when it came out, like everybody was playing it on their computers. Like, what's this game? Like, it's by Blizzard, the guys who did Warcraft, because I don't think StarCraft was out at the time. I don't think. Or no, I think StarCraft was out. Anyway, I was like, oh yeah, no, it's like a RPG, but you like kill waves of enemies and you load up on items and shit. And I remember watching them play it because I didn't have a lot of money. I was in college, and I spent a lot of my time at the cyber cafe just watching people play. And because again, I was okay with that. I was totally cool with just watching, and it was a cool core group who usually showed up at the cyber cafe. So I spent a lot of time watching that. So of course I eventually bought it and spent god awful amount of hours playing it at home over my 48.8 dial-up modem. And I remember hacking was rampant. Hacking was absolutely rampant. And I remember I got so fed up, and duping. Duping was huge, where you could basically drop an item on the ground, you like walk away from it, and something about I think what you had to do, drop an item on the ground, walk away, and then click the item so that you're going to go pick it up, and then choose another item in inventory and try to drop it at the same time that you're picking that other item up. And you would, if you timed it right, you would dupe it. It was pretty easy to do. And it broke the game all to hell. And Blizzard never really did anything about it, as far as I remember. And I remember I got so fed up with it. And people were hacking items too. Like, they were creating these ridiculously powerful items. So I remember what I used to do. I actually used a hack to make myself invisible. And I would sneak into games where people were duping, and I would steal the items that they were duping to kind of like get back at them and try to stop them from hacking, or just be a dick to people. I was never a dick to people who weren't hacking or cheating, but I always did that to people who were especially dupers. And I always just found that amused myself. I don't think I did that a whole lot, but just enough when I got like frustrated. I was like, no, fuck these guys. I'm going to mess with them. But yeah, I played that a lot. And then Diablo 2, when that came out, I played that a hell of a lot. Diablo 2, I did so many runs with Diablo 2, and I just had a lot of fun with it. I don't really have there's much to talk about. I don't remember any particular like amusing stories that happened in Diablo 1 or Diablo 2, kind of like I did with the other games. But it definitely, I put a lot of time into those games, and I very much enjoyed them. And oh, they stick out. Even though, funny enough, all that time in Diablo 2 that I spent, I didn't pick up the expansion until years and years later. Why not? Because of the next game on the list, EverQuest. I started working with a guy that I knew on a web startup. Keeping in mind, this was 1999, I think, 2000, 1999, somewhere in there. This was when like computing jobs were like the golden ticket. Like if you had computer skills, like you were in, like this is the industry that'll never go away. TechBrust, what's that? And they had that startup, and there was a few of us there. There was like four or five of us who were in the games, and I was huge into Diablo 2 at the time. Most of the other folks were in the EverQuest. They're telling about this game called EverQuest, and I had never gotten to EverQuest. I had always heard, and the reason being is I remember when Ultima Online came out, and it sounded really interesting, but I didn't have the money for it, and I definitely didn't have the money for a subscription fee because I was broke college student. And I remember talking to people, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's overrun by hackers, and it's overrun by people with like really good like college level connections, people who had like dorms. They had really good fast speed internet connections, and they could dominate everybody else with a dial-up modem, which is what I would have had." So I was like, that kind of put me off. So I wasn't interested. So when EverQuest came out, I kind of was thinking the same thing. So I didn't really keep up with it. And when I started that job at that startup, they were telling me, "Oh, you got to come play EverQuest. You got to come play EverQuest. Like this game is amazing." And I think one of the guys I was actually roommates with, and I watched him playing it. And I was like, "This game looks really cool." So I picked it up. This was 2000. It had been 2000 because Kunark was out. Ruins of Kunark was out. So it had to have been 2000, probably halfway through 2000, something like that. I picked up EverQuest, and that ended my Diablo addiction. I kind of played both for a while, and then I ended up playing Diablo. And I played EverQuest on the test server, oddly enough, because I don't know how they got on the test server, but I ended up on the test server, and I think I was played EverQuest for like three and a half years, something like that. Now, anybody who's been with me on the channel very long knows that I tend to badmouth EverQuest. And don't get me wrong, I loved my time with EverQuest. Definitely some memorable things in EverQuest that I'll never forget, that I will take with me to my grave. And I do not regret the time that I spent playing EverQuest at all. Like if I had to do it again, I would have done it again. In fact, I would have probably started sooner. But I think EverQuest was good because it was the best at the time. I don't think it was designed very well. People say EverQuest was difficult. EverQuest was punishing. It wasn't really difficult. Especially once you started getting to raids, the raids generally weren't very hard. It was stick monster in corner, get the right like AE protection, and just beat on the creature until it was dead. There was obviously exceptions. There were some definitely very tricky bosses in various expansions. But for the most part, it wasn't that difficult. There was a lot of really boring parts. Soloing was boring as piss if you were anything other than a druid or a wizard. And it was just super, super slow, super, super tedious in a lot of things. And I think it was just not designed well. But again, it was the best that we had, right? It's like if you took a truck full of Zima to a dry county, right? A county that didn't have any liquor at all and hadn't had liquor for over a year. People would scoop that Zima up like it was crack cocaine, but it's still Zima, right? I don't even know if Zima is still around. I don't drink, so I don't know if Zima is still around. But that very, very short amount of time in my life that I drank a little bit, I drank Zima because that was cheap and it's what we had. But I never drank to get drunk. I've actually pop quiz. I've never actually been drunk in my life, but I never I was never a big drinker, but I did drink Zima sometimes, just mostly because I was thirsty, oddly enough. But anyway, yeah, I know Zima is shitty. That's why I make that analogy. But EverQuest wasn't, I wouldn't say EverQuest was shitty. I just think it wasn't designed well. But again, absolutely enjoy my time. There's so many great memories I have of the people and experiences that I had in EverQuest that, again, I will take with me to my grave. And I absolutely do not regret my time. But I'm not under any delusions that EverQuest was a game. It has failed the test of time as far as I'm concerned, because if you re-released it now, I would definitely not play it. I would not have the patience for it. Grinding out shit, like sitting in one spot and pulling mobs to you for hours on end, which was the most efficient way to do things, to get loot and to get XP. Like, nope. Like, I would get bored out of my mind within like 30 minutes. EverQuest was more, and this was even popular to say back when EverQuest's heyday, was that EverQuest was more of a visual chat room than anything else. The thing that kept EverQuest from being mind-numbingly boring was having people, grouping with people that you liked to chat with. And then, of course, keep in mind, again, this is before voice chat, so it was all like text chat. So the combat was just slow. So we had plenty of time to chat with text. So yeah, it was more the people than anything else. But so what broke me off my EverQuest addiction? Well, I don't think it's very hard to guess. It was WoW. I remember hearing about World of Warcraft when it was first announced and thinking, holy shit, a Warcraft MMO by Blizzard. Because up until now, Blizzard had made StarCraft, Warcraft 2 and 3. Yeah, 3. Warcraft 3 and Diablo 1 and 2. So they're like home runs all the way down. So when they announced, wow, World of Warcraft, we're like, holy shit, like, my God, like, this is going to be amazing. I had a friend on test. His name was Brujo, or it's a Brujo, I think is how you pronounce it. And he was in good with several developers. And he also, I think he knew some developers for WoW. He had alpha access. So, excuse me. So I think it was sometime, it was probably about 6 months, give or take, before WoW was released. I was so hyped for this game. I was so hyped. And he had alpha access, but he wasn't that interested. So he gave me his account info and I played it and I was like, this is where I'm going. This is the game. This is where I'm going. EverQuest is dead to me. Like, this is what I want to play. And I decided very quickly that WoW was where I wanted to go. So I played like even the 6 months or so of alpha. This was back when before they implemented Rest XP, you could also choose where you wanted your skill points to go. Like when you leveled, you could put points into health or dexterity or whatever. They end up taking that out, making it automatic. I remember Rest XP used to be awful. Like when they first implemented it, it was terrible. Like you had, like instead of it being a bonus, it would be a big negative. So imagine instead of getting that nice huge boost at the beginning of your leveling curve, you had that same leveling curve to start with, like the base curve, not the bonus curve, but the base curve. And the more you played, the worse it got. Like the more and more mobs you had to kill. It was a terrible idea. But they fixed it, so it was actually pretty good, I think, overall. But yeah, anyway, I obviously jumped ship, and it didn't hurt that around that same time, EverQuest expansion Gates of Discord came out, and I had a shitty machine at the time, and it wouldn't even properly run that expansion. I think I might have bought it. No, I would think it was in the beta test for it, but like I couldn't even really run it properly. So that pretty much, I mean, if it wasn't already had been sealed, that sealed the deal, and I made my move over to World of Warcraft and never looked back. I played WoW for about 4 years. I got one character banned for selling gold. I was desperately in need of money and not proud of it, but I made a lot of gold and I contacted this web gold seller. And basically, I was supposed to ship the gold to them, like via the in-game mail system. And apparently, their system is set up such that they track they know who the gold sellers are, and they pay attention to who sends them gold just randomly, and they'll ban you for it. So there was no like in-game conversation about like, hey, here's the gold I told you I would send. They just flag anybody who sends gold to that account and automatically just bans them. So that was a huge hit. That was a big morale hit I did not need at the time. But I bought a new account, of course, and kept playing because this was right after Burning Crusade, or not Burning Crusade. This was after. Wait, is Burning Crusade when we got Paladins? I think it was, or was it? Shit, I don't remember. Anyway, it was the expansion we got Paladins because I remember I had I leveled a Paladin. And I actually, maybe I stopped playing around the time. Anyway, I had a few phases where I stopped WoW and then went back. But pretty much the final real time that I quit WoW was sometime after like Lich King, I think. Maybe a year after Lich King. We were on a really shitty server. It was one of those guilds that was like always teetering between casual and hardcore. Like you had the people who really wanted a hardcore raid, but then the other people who were either terrible or would barely. Those annoying people who would only show up to raids once we'd already mastered it. They wouldn't show up to the raids where we were just killing ourselves trying to learn it. But as soon as we learned it, hey guys, suddenly my time freed up and I can play WoW now. Wow, isn't this cool? What loot drops here, by the way? So we had a lot of those type of people. And the pool of Horde players on the server Icecrown at the time was very crappy. And we eventually moved to Area 52. But by then, pretty much the guild had like all fallen apart. And I got kind of tired of looking for a new guild. So that's pretty much was the end of it for me. Shortly after we moved to Area 52. And I think I picked up, I didn't buy the Mist of Pandaria release. I bought it like a year later or something like that. And I played around with a little bit. The community was still shit. Like I had one guy freak out on me because I was playing a Panda Monk and we were doing like a low level dungeon. And I was end up meleeing because he was near full health almost the entire time. And I just got tired of sitting there healing. So I meleeed a little bit and I was using my melee, healing abilities to heal the group. And whenever he would get a little low, I'd toss a heal on him. But like I remember like almost near the end of the dungeon, like one of those encounters with like a lot of enemies coming at once, like he took a shitload of damage like really fast. And so I had to like pop a heal on him really quick. And he like freaked out. And he's like, oh my God, stop meleeing. You've got to fucking focus on healing me. I'm like, okay, dumbass. First of all, you do your shitty job. You keep doing your shitty job tanking and I'll just keep healing you. Like, secondly, you didn't die. And thirdly, you've been at 99% health almost this entire run. And he's like fucking freaking out. And I was like, whatever. So funny enough, I joined another random group after that and he was still the tank. And he ended up going off on somebody else. Cause like, I was like, fine, I'll just sit back and heal. So like, I just kind of basically just sat back and barely paid attention and healed. And, which I don't know why. I should just melee just to piss him off. But he started going off on the like a rogue for some stupid reason, and I think we both ended up making fun of him, and he ended up leaving the group. And I was like, "Yep, community still seems kind of shitty." But anyway, yeah, I just played like a month or two and kind of quit. But yeah, WoW still does have a place in my heart. I spent like 4 years playing it. I ran a guild. I was an officer in a different guild. I played various classes and raids. I love the raids. So, I definitely enjoyed my time in WoW. And every now and then I get the pull to go back and play it. But I don't know if I really have. With the channel, trying to get the channel going, I don't think I have the time to play any specific MMO a whole lot. Because I don't think people want to see me just farting around on alt. Because honestly, that's what I enjoy the most. I've kind of become casual when it comes to MMOs, as much as that makes me want to throw up in my mouth. I enjoy just kind of doing the side stuff and the leveling. And I want to do raids and dungeons, but I don't want to do the schedule anymore. I don't want to do the, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 2 days a week. Every Monday and Friday, we do raids. And I totally understand people who want to do that. Because I was like that. I was absolutely into that at one point. And if I didn't have the channel, I probably would want to do that. But I just nowadays I'm just kind of like, you know what? I just want to do some dungeons, do some group stuff, work on my crafting, just just chill out, man. Just relax and do my thing in my MMO, whatever it is. So yeah, most of my hardcore. I don't even know if I was really hardcore back in the day. I wanted to be hardcore, but I kept getting in like guilds with full of either people who were just bad or didn't want to spend the time doing the raids and whatnot. But anyway, another MMO that I wanted to give honorable mention to, and this is going to seem weird, Star Wars Galaxies. Now, Star Wars Galaxies had a lot of problems. I got into the beta, and this is when you actually had to buy the disc to get into the beta, but I thought it was worth it. And it was, because I played it, and the crafting system was amazing. I don't want to get into it in too much depth, but I was a droid engineer, and I absolutely loved the crafting in Star Wars. To this day, Star Wars Galaxies has the best crafting system of any MMO I've ever played. And I almost left EverQuest early for Star Wars Galaxies. But when they announced the release date, when we were in beta, and I remember specifically in the beta forums, people were like, this game is not ready. This game is not even close to being ready. And it was because they were like, release date a month from now. And we're like, this game's not going to be ready in a month. We're like, there's just no way. And sure enough, when it released, it was a horrible launch. Like the launch was a total clusterfuck. And I ended up not buying it because I knew it was going to be a clusterfuck. I mean, a lot of the high-end droid engineer recipes didn't even work. So I'm just kind of rambling now. Oh, God, people have fallen asleep by now. Hopefully you're still enjoying this. Let me know in the comments if you're still listening up until this point and if this is interesting at all. But because I realize I'm just kind of giving old war stories at this point. But yeah, I just knew it was going to be a total clusterfuck because a lot of the stuff was broken, and it was. So I never played it at release, and I kept playing EverQuest. But anyway, next game I want to talk about. We're getting close to the end of the list, I promise. Bayonetta, again, not a unknown game. It didn't sell all that well. It sold okay. I love Bayonetta. Bayonetta is on my top 5 list of favorite games, and I haven't played at length the original 3 Devil May Cry games. So Bayonetta was the first really action-y combat game of that type. And I absolutely love it. I can still pick that game up today and play for an hour or so and just really enjoy my time. It's one of those games though where I only care about the gameplay. Graphically it looks good, but like the story is so Japanese. It's like so weird. I'm just like, I don't even know what the hell's going on. I just want to kick the shit out of some angels. And I don't have a whole lot to say with Bayonetta, but I just kind of wanted to throw it out there as a game that whenever I think about some of the greatest games I've ever played that I want to see more of, is Bayonetta is definitely one of those games. The last game I'm going to mention, again, I'm sure there's more, but this has already been super long, is The Walking Dead. I've only played the season 1. Walking Dead gets a good mention because it's really one of the first games that I've played and remember having talked about so much, that focus so much on the story. Like the gameplay isn't there. If you took the story out, The Walking Dead is an incredibly boring ass game. But and there's arguments to be made that, well, why not just make this like some kind of animated short? And not to get into it too much, I think it is a little different because you do control the character, you control the reaction, so you get a little bit more into it yourself instead, as more of an actor in the whole scene, as opposed to just a viewing participant, or just a viewer, if that makes sense. You're an active participant. So that there's some worthwhile arguments to be made about that, but I think it's really interesting in that it focused so much on the story, and more for most games, I'm going to say that the mechanics or the gameplay are more important than the story, right? Like RPGs, obviously, a lot of those mechanics are kind of like, but the stories are a little deeper, but they're at least there. They're interesting. Like Walking Dead, because I remember making this kind of as an offhand comment when I was giving my short review at the end of the Walking Dead playthrough, was that I was like, it kind of wasn't even really a game. And and I'm definitely not going to get into that conversation, but I think it barely is a game. Like, it's just barely a game. But I'm okay with that. Like, that's the thing. Like, even if I want to say it's not a game, I don't really care. I'd still recommend it to people. It's not like, well, I don't think it's a game, therefore I think it's shit. Like, it doesn't work like that. I think, technically, I think it is a game. I think it's barely a game. But it's an interesting, different kind of a route for a quote-unquote game to take. And I wanted to talk about it too because I noticed when we talk on the podcast with Capanius, Super Game Talk HD Turbo Remix. You should be listening to that. Check my channel for it. Or I forget what the URL is. Anyway, we very frequently refer back to The Walking Dead because it is so, I don't want to say unique, but well known for being a game that is very, very, very lacking on gameplay, actual gameplay. But the story is so good and so compelling, it doesn't matter. It's one of those very, very few games that can have shitty gameplay, but the story is so good you don't even care. Like most games, if your gameplay is shitty, the game's probably going to be not worth playing. Or just go read the Wikipedia article and find out what happens in the story. But this one is different in that it really does pull you in. It's good despite the poor gameplay, if that makes sense. So anyway, I think that one was worth mentioning as well. So anyway, that's all that I had to talk about. I say that's all I had to talk about when this video's probably been at least an hour and a half. So anyway, hopefully at least some of you guys thought this was interesting. And I also realized that a lot of you folks are probably younger than me, in some cases significantly younger than me. So, hopefully one thing that I can bring to the table is kind of my kind of take on gaming history insofar as what I've experienced going from like my old Atari 2600 to the NES to the NES, or to the NES to the Super Nintendo and onward and upward. So hopefully at least some of that has been partially of interest to you. As always, thank you for watching. Thanks again to Brian H. for your supports on Patreon. Very much means a lot to me that you feel my content is good enough to actually support financially. Thanks everyone for watching and subscribing to the channel. I appreciate your support as well. Thanks again for watching. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments below. Interject what you thought on any particular topic that I talked about, or any games that you think that I might have missed that I might want to check out. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.